right, so we're going to look at a few examples. This one, we have a department store. They mail a customer satisfaction survey to people who make credit card purchases at the store. So this particular month, 45,000 people made credit card purchases at the store. Surveys are mailed to 1,000 of those people that were chosen at random, and 137 people return the form. And so we want to know what's the population, what's the sample. Okay, so the population is the whole group we're interested in, right? So this is going to be all the people who made credit card purchases at the store this particular month. All right, so we'll say all, which happens to be 45,000 for once we actually know the size of the population. So all of the customers who made credit card purchases at the store. So credit card purchases at the store. Okay, now what's the sample? Now here's what we have to remember. It's the individuals who are actually measured. Okay, so you might say, oh, it's the 1,000 people, 1,000 customers that were selected. And you would say, but wait, not all 1,000 of those were measured. All right, so we kind of have a difference here. We have the intended sample was the 1,000 customers. I'm going to add this month to the population. So the intended sample is the 1,000 customers of the store who made credit card purchases. I'm not going to write all of that down, but the actual sample is only the 137 who returned the form, presumably filled out. Okay, and even though we haven't talked about bias yet, we do hopefully recognize that something is wrong here. We have a problem because we selected 1,000 people for our sample, but only 100, just under 14% return the form, right? What about the other 863, right? We didn't get to measure them, but they should have been in the sample. And this is what's called non-response. Okay, this is a non-response bias. So we have only 13.7% of those selected returned the survey. And there may be some sort of difference between those who returned the survey and those who didn't. Okay? And we'll talk more about biases in a little bit, but I want to get you kind of thinking about those. Okay. What about this one? This one's a little bit different, right? Student archaeologists. We have an archaeological dig, turns up a large number of artifacts, and we have students working on the project, and it's their job to classify each artifact. You know, maybe it's pottery, maybe it's weapons, maybe it's who knows what, and give it a number, right? And so the counts in the different categories are important for understanding the site. Was it residential? Was it farming? Was it an armory, whatever, right? So the project director chooses 2% of the artifacts at random and checks the student's work. And so we want to know what's the population and, of course, what's the sample. And so here he's selecting artifacts. And in this case, it only tells us explicitly the sample, right? But the population, we can infer, would be all the artifacts that were classified by the students, or actually artifacts, there we go. We'll just say all the artifacts from the site, and our sample, of course, would be the 2% that were checked. So the 2% of the artifacts. And we don't know how many of those are artifacts, there we go, close enough, that were checked. Okay, so there we go. Don't overthink here, right? It's the population is the whole group that we're interested in. the sample, those that we actually check, that we actually measure. All right, and we'll do these last two. We want to identify the sample in the population. We have a quality control manager randomly selects 50 bottles of Coca-Cola that were filled on October 15th to assess the calibration of the filling machine. And so here we can say our sample, we can tell, you know, what was selected, 50 bottles of Coca-Cola, right, that were filled on October 15th. And if you just said 50 bottles of Coca-Cola, that would be fine, right? The population is the larger group that the sample is selected from, so this would probably be all bottles of Coke that were filled on October 15th, right? So you'll notice that the sample is going to have almost always how many, so you have to have a number in there and a description of what the individuals are. All right, so we need both of those things. For the population, you need the description. You won't always have the size of the population. Okay. And the second one here in the Gallup organization contacts 1,028 teenagers who are 13 to 17 and live in the U.S. and asks whether or not they had been prescribed medication for any mental disorders such as depression or anxiety. And so again, we can say, hey, what's the sample? It's those that were actually measured or contacted. So this is 1,028 teens aged, or so we'll go ahead and say U.S. teens aged 13 to 17, right? There we go, that's it. And the population, we would assume here, all U.S. teens 13 to 17. Okay, the rest of it gives you information about the variables that are being measured, but we're not being asked about that right here. Okay, so that's a good place to break, and we'll talk about the census next.